Hi everyone, I am Pallav. I am your host for the day, and today we'll be discussing about the Singapore invoicing. We have Mr. Tapas with us. He is the domain expert at Cygnet. He helps with the functional knowledge, whether it is India, UAE, Singapore, or any country's tax reforms or laws that we need to understand. We have Anil sir, who heads the business at Cygnet. He has been playing an instrumental role in terms of communicating or meeting customers globally as well as domestically. And we have Viral Vandre. He looks after the product development at Cygnet. So Viral plays an instrumental role in developing the product as per the local needs and the laws which has been reformed by the various countries. So to start off with, Anil sir, a very basic question. We have been listening about e-invoicing very oftenly today. So what is this e-invoicing? What exactly does an e-invoicing mean in a very layman language?
Well, e-invoicing is a digital format of invoicing. One is, of course, we all generate invoice through our respective accounting software. Now, taking this in a digital format and transacting it with the government and subscribing and giving it to the government or reporting it to it. So, there are couple of variations there with multiple governments have taken up. Somebody has implemented as a clearance model where every invoice that you generate has to go back to the government authority. They will accept it, give the required transactional confirmations back in the form of some ID or a QR which is happening in India, and it comes back and you imprint into your invoice. Or in some cases where it is only a reporting, whatever invoice you generate, report it with the respective authorities. So these are broadly the two frame categories, and then again in the implementation phase you would have your own standalone ESPs who can generate it, or there is a PayPal framework through which it is not just for invoice, for any document movement, but then invoice becomes a part of that entire framework through which e-invoicing can be implemented. So that's in gist of what e-invoicing as a functionality is what you will do. But for every invoice then you generate, now an invoice will be registered with the respective authorities.
So, sir, once a country introduces an e-invoicing, what are the business implications, and what does the businesses will have to take care of, and how will they have to ensure that they are ready with this compliance?
Before they get into the readiness part of it, first and foremost the business has to understand is the implication of e-invoicing. E-invoicing means the authorities now will have your transactions, your HSN details, your every transaction, every invoice, every transaction exposure, the government will have full access to. So now, whatever taxes, let's say in Singapore we do GST filing, I do on a summary basis. Against that, now the government will have transaction wise exposure. So, one, everyone has to understand that government knows fully of what you're doing, and every single tax transaction aspects will now be visualized very specifically through a reconciliation. They will reconcile it immediately, understand whether the right taxes have been paying or time or not, and whether the right amount has been paid. So that is one of the biggest and significant change which Singapore business will have to go through. They are all used to summary GST filing. Against that, now the government will have every invoice transaction wise exposure available with them. So this is one big difference with the industry has to get ready and understand that what all other precautions they need to take to ensure that they meet this compliance aspect fully.
Okay. Sir, if I look from a business perspective, what is the advantage that I will be getting if I'm getting into the invoicing regime?
So before I would say and talk about the advantage, I would say the readiness part of it, which you had asked in the earlier question. The most important is what are your various steps before you actually generate an invoice. The invoice that I am generating, what are the various implications of it in the form of any change in rate, any change in volumes, any change in anything that you want to do, your debit notes, your credit notes that you raise. All these aspects will have to be recalibrated very specifically. Parallelly, you will have to start understanding the data sources for your entire e-invoicing. How many data sources I have, how I am going to get this data and make these things about this entire thing. So these preparation would be critical to me getting ready for e-invoicing. And now the main part of it, of what is the advantage. I specifically feel that e-invoicing is the key beneficiary is the government. It is ensuring that they get their taxes to the last time available and full visibility is available. But if you look into the business process of an enterprise, he is now getting his specifically on a PayPal framework which is there in Singapore, which they call as Invoice Now framework. They are going to get the invoice copy of their counterparty invoice also into their ERP. Today, there is a huge process into that entire purchase invoice transaction. Instead, I will now have the purchase data available to me. So that's a huge change. If you look into that entire aspect, it's a huge change. I just have to ensure that I use this data to do my further automation of my ERN, GRN plus other aspects that I need to do. But the entire purchase part of it will get fully digitized in the process. And that in turn can have its own implication in the form of if I want to have my invoice discounting, my data is available to me post validation from the government aspect, and also ensuring that this data is available for various other aspects of business, including my inventory management and various other stuff. Everything happens nearly online. So that's the basic advantage. On the incoming part of it, you would see a huge change into the way you operate, apart from the front sales invoice automation.
So Tapas, a quick question for you. Anil sir rightly, mentioned on what are the business implications. How do you see that? How does an organization will have to be ready from a compliance standpoint of view when they start adopting the e-invoicing for the Singapore?
Right. So first and foremost, the current format in which the people in general or the businesses in Singapore are generating invoices is the BIS3 format. Once e-invoicing is implemented in Singapore, it would be following the PayPal print format, which is again, so PayPal is a standard in organization. It's a non-profit which mandates or which has a standard format using which e-invoicing can be generated globally. So it mandates a global standard. Singapore has slightly tweaked this format into their requirement. So once e-invoicing comes in, this particular format shall have to be implemented by the organization. So this is one biggest shift. Now, this one shift involves modifications of their ERP system, getting it integrated appropriately so that the invoices are reported or transmitted using the PayPal framework. It also involves signing up with a trusted e-invoicing access provider so that this entire invoicing transmission can be facilitated. So not only their changing of their ERP systems modifications as well as signing up with service provider as an access point provider is something that businesses will have to take care of.
So, Tapas, what I understand is not only from a regulatory standpoint of view, you will also have to be very much updated from your technology that you use. So, next question to you, Viral. So, from a technology perspective, what do you think? What are the shifts that the businesses will have to do when they adopt for invoicing?
Okay. So, starting with the basics, data holds as a key part of any transmission or a communication that happens with the government. First of all, if we talk about mapping up the data, so first thing is right now, whatever users are going to punch in with respect to the invoice, whatever data they are going to do it, they'll continue doing it. But there might be a wide difference between what is need to be submitted to the authority and what only the data that are getting captured into the ERP. So first and foremost, the delta part of what is being transmitted to the government and what is captured as a part of the ARP that needs to be looked into. Second part is the validations. Right now, of course, the businesses will be filing the returns and they'll be filing the returns and populating the invoice data only basis what is required to be submitted to the government. But now, when we talk from the holistic perspective, there will be various calculations that will be required in place in order to submit certain set of data to the government. So they might not be having fields, that might be having fields, and there might be having some calculated columns that needs to be replicated into this ERP. Though there are certain service providers like we as a Cygnet, we automate certain things that helps, client capture the data on the fly. They don't need to manually capture all this data into the ERP and all these things. So this is somewhat they need to be ready from the data perspective. Second are validations. Validations form as a key part of any submission and transmission of data from to a buyer or to the authority. The only reason being that if you don't follow the validations, simply your invoice won't flow through. So you need to be ensured that whatever data you are submitting to the government is a well validated, pre-validated data. Third is the kind of model you choose into. As both the gentlemen rightly portrayed out, that one needs to get attached to a service provider. Now, choosing a service provider will not just serve the sole purpose. The reason being, the model for which you want to go ahead with, like on-premise, private, or a public cloud, that also holds as a key information. It depends upon business to business. If there are banks, if there are NBFCs, they will not need to, they will not like to get their data out of their premises and then, submit the data to the authority. So there are limited amount of service providers who are actually, providing such a kind of a functionality or a facility so that their data remains on premise and still the transmission happens between the buyer and to the government. So any processing that happens, it happens within this. And last but not the least, the thing is, when we talk about people as a framework, it's quite complex in nature because there are various hops that are created. So when we talk about sending the data to the authority or sending the data to the buyer, it's initiated from the ERP, goes to the service provider. It needs to pass through an access points. A lookup has to be done to the SMP, and then particularly after that, the data gets submitted to the buyer or to the authority. So from the technology perspective, seem to be quite a complex pool of ecosystems that are there. But still, if chosen wisely and if opted wisely and implemented wisely, this can be quite optimized and simplified in a manner.
Tapas, like we are expecting the e-invoicing to get implemented by 25th, 2025 November. So, are there any penalties or are there any implications if the organizations are not, getting enrolled into the invoice regime which is being mandated by the governments? Or if not, or maybe how early should they start looking for any service providers to ensure that they are meeting the deadlines and they are smoothly, adopting the invoice mandate?
So the e-invoicing has been implemented in a phased format in Singapore. What they are saying is that by May 2025, there are certain taxpayers or certain businesses who can opt for it voluntarily. And then come November 2025, invoice businesses or companies which got incorporated, and within 6 months of their incorporation, if they had voluntarily opted for a GST registration in Singapore, they are mandatorily required to also go for e-invoicing in Singapore. Now, if you don't follow it, of course, in any law, if there is something which is mandated by the government, you don't do it, there is always a penalty. So in Singapore, this penalty might go up to $5,000 for each offense. It would also result into so many other issues. You in the department, you might be facing a lot of scrutiny from the department. Your recipient, if you are still using the normal invoice formats, the recipient would not be able to take the input tax credit or claim the VAT GST credit in Singapore. So penalty for sure is there, but the other implications are also something which would have a wide ramifications. And e-invoicing, which is something which is for each and every transaction that you do. If you don't follow it from day one, it is going to practically halt your business if you don't do it properly. So while you might not want to go for this e-invoicing from May 2025 when it is getting implemented voluntarily, but it does make sense to start interacting with a service provider, understand, as Viral pointed out, what are the gaps, what are the data points that you are capturing right now into your invoices versus what would be required if you are going for e-invoicing within the Invoice Now and PayPal framework. Do this gap analysis and then implement this so that you are ready from the day one when it comes in.
So this leads to me one more question that Anil sir was, mentioning that currently the taxpayers are filing their GST returns quarterly, that too at a summary level. With e-invoicing getting implemented, the government will have access to the line items as well. So do we foresee that the government will also start looking for, a line item level reporting rather than a summary level reporting for the GST compliances as well?
Well, this is a very interesting question. So let's take an example of India where line item reporting was always there and then e-invoicing came in. Then there are certain other countries who have also implemented e-invoicing. For example, KSA, where again a summary level reporting was there. E-invoicing came in, but then reporting did not change. So while it would be difficult to predict as to after implementation of e-invoicing whether the government is going to change the reporting, but as Anil sir very rightly pointed out, one thing is very sure, the government now has your invoice wise details. So the summary that you prepare, you have to ensure that whatever line item details were reported through this e-invoicing five corner PayPal framework, you ensure that your summary matches with it. Otherwise, you are definitely going to face an intense scrutiny from the government. So whether or not the government is going to mandate a line item wise reporting into the written format, it once e-invoicing becomes mandatory, it's quite essential that as a business, you have the line item details breakup once you do your summary level reporting on the VAT returns.
Just to add what Tapas said, even in India we had transaction wise, but post e-invoicing, the way we are seeing now, e-invoicing is getting auto drafted for filing. Who knows? Many of them might get cues from this and that might decide that okay, we were summary level, but let's use this as a cue to auto draft the transaction wise data and then see
Populate this.
how the filing goes.
Well, we have e-invoicing solutions for India, KSA, Malaysia, Kenya. Any lessons that the businesses at Singapore needs to learn from the countries that they have already adopted e-invoicing?
So if we talk from a holistic perspective, whether it's a reporting model, whether it's a clearance model, or whether it's just, submitting the invoice to the government, stamping it and getting it back, the sole purpose of e-invoicing is clear. It's about getting the compliance ready with respect to submission of your liabilities and credits, whatever you are going to do in the return, right? Now the benefits that the benefits that the businesses will incur, it would be something like whatever manual process that are going on right now. If we talk about an invoice in certain countries, the invoice are a pure form of a PDF or an email, a paper-based invoices that are being transacted between a seller and a buyer. Gradually transforming into an e-invoicing regime will basically, optimize it. How will it optimize? It will be a structured form of the things. The word electronic preceding the invoice itself means that something is going to be structured. Way during the nomadic life when it was, a paper-based mailing and everything, then the email came into pictures. Obviously, there was a structured form of a text that was, in there. It was submitted electronically. That means it had some mechanism or a protocol by which it was submitted. It was one particular protocol by which it was submitted. Similarly, e-invoicing, it will be a structured form of an invoice. It will be transmitted over a protocol, whether it's an API or XML based submission. That means that whatever things are adopted by the business, it is same across all the businesses within the same country. So it can be same within India, it can be same across the country. And the primary advantage of people is it also leverage the cross-border transaction of the invoices. So this is one step above it. So whenever we talk from a business perspective, yes, they are going global if adopted by a people. They are going more digital and in a more structured way, they'll be able to furnish the e-invoices. And the way of receiving the invoice between a seller and a buyer, taking follow-ups and everything, this all can be minimized. The reason being each and every framework, whether it's a clearance model, it's if it's a people, a kind of a success or a failure mechanism is being sent back to the seller saying that okay, your submission was a failure, etc. So benefits do reap out of the e-invoicing part too. And obviously when e-invoicing comes into picture, there will be a trust and a bond that will be created between the government and the businesses. The reason being, any paper-based notices that might be flowing to the businesses, there might be some certain amount of discrepancies, attached to it. But once everything is digitized, once everything is, a formally structured manner available to the businesses, available to the government, there will be an easy way of reconciling the things, even to the businesses and even to the government. a layer of transparency is created between the government and the business, and that is how, that is how the things are getting smoother when the interaction of government and the businesses come into picture. So e-invoicing has a holistic benefit way from the business perspective as well as from the government perspective.
Before we wrap up, Anil sir, one last question. If you had one piece of advice for any businesses before they adopt for the invoicing, what it would be?
There are 2 to 3 steps. One, think through what the government is going to have in future. That's point number 1. And if government is digitizing it, you will have to look into your existing processes and revise where required. That is something which is very, very critical. And third, of course, you will have to adapt to the technology. When we are talking about PayPal, e-invoicing is just a part of it. It is actually a specified set of documents can be transferred, which tomorrow could mean a PO or a bill of entry or any other thing, which holistically means your entire digitization process will go through a sea change. So there are plenty of things. You'll have to have an open mind, understand each of the changes that the current system is going to bring along with the specific need that is required, and look compliance holistically instead of looking at it as a piecemeal basis. So you will have to now look into e-invoicing, the GST returns, the reconciliation around it, your GL reconciliation, and understand your VAT reclaims or GST reclaims that you are doing everything under one frame.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Tapas. Thank you, Viral. It was
Thanks,
indeed a very, knowledge sharing session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pallav. Thank you.